There were a lot of players who had really good weeks who had not been very good yet, so the buy low window on some guys has definitely closed. But there are still a couple of buy low guys that we need to go after before week 6 fantasy football, and I'm doing everything I can to get us ready for week 6 fantasy football already, so please go down there and drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, getting into our first guy, it is the last week that you have any shot of buying low on Rashee Rice. He has been on this buy low video for 3 straight weeks now because I've been trying to tell people, if you are in good position, if you are still undefeated, now you're 5-0, or if you're 4-1 and you believe in your team very much, then this is the time to go get Rashee Rice, particularly right now if you have not done so already. Because I guarantee you, there's going to be teams out there who are 1-4, who are 0-5, who are panicked right now. It is all abort on their fantasy teams, and they will take whatever they can get to help them win tomorrow or to help them win the next week. This is the time that you have to go in for Rashee Rice. And of course, the buy low window for him has definitely shrunk to a point where he's not as big of a buy low had you bought him before week 4 fantasy football, for example. But I think there still is an opportunity before week 6, and that's why I want to go after somebody like Michael Pittman and Saquon Barkley for Rashee Rice and James Cook. Because when you look at the Saquon Barkley situation, right, they may still feel like they're getting a win by getting Saquon Barkley out of the equation because he is going to help you today, and also Michael Pittman Jr. will help you today as well. But the reality is that Saquon Barkley is actually not that much more worth it, if at all, than a guy like James Cook, and Rashee Rice is clearly going to be a more dominant fantasy option when he gets back than Michael Pittman would be. So this will feel like a win to them because it helps them today. But it will also feel like a massive win for you if you're being smart about it, because James Cook and Saquon Barkley are basically on the same level, I would say, at this point. But James Cook has been better in fantasy. And then you look at Rashee Rice, and that is an upgrade over Michael Pittman Jr. If you are 5-0, 4-1, or even 3-2, and you feel really good about your team for the next week or so, this is a move that I would particularly make very, very quickly this week. Very, very quickly. Now, going into our next guy right here, I'm actually really big on the idea of Trey McBride and trading low for him right now, because if you look at the start of Trey McBride's year, it's not like it's been bad. Like, it looks a lot similar to how it looked at the beginning of last year, which was that this guy is so clearly their number one target in this offense, but at the same time, it's not really amounting to much fantasy production because he's not getting in the end zone. But if you look at the guy's target share through the first couple of weeks, he's got 42 targets in 5 games. So that's basically like 8 to 9 targets per game. So this guy has not had a single game worse than like 9 fantasy points in a full PPR format. And if you play fantasy football, you know that finding 9 points at the tight end position on a weekly basis is a tall task to ask for. Trey McBride has already not been bad. He's actually the tight end 4 in a full PPR format as of this moment in time. And I do think that it will get better for Trey McBride moving forward, because I have a hard time believing that a guy who leads the team in targets on a weekly basis doesn't get in the end zone at least a couple of times in a year. Now, Trey McBride has actually never been that big of a red zone threat and has never really gotten in the end zone that many times. But he will go through a stretch where he will carry your team to victory because of 25-point performances, because you add on that volume with the fact that he catches a touchdown pass, that's going to take your team over the top. And I think right now, we are in this unique window where Trey McBride, coming off his worst game, somebody might be longing for more at the tight end position. And that's where a trade like this comes into play. So what I'm looking to go deal is Jake Ferguson, this year's tight end 1 in fantasy so far, and Jamar Chase off a dominant week for Trey McBride and Jackson Smith-Njigba. So Jackson Smith-Njigba, I would definitely take long-term over Jamar Chase, but Jamar Chase is coming off a dominant performance because, number one, he is a dominant player, and they couldn't afford to not get him the ball any much longer. They had to do what they had to do, and Jamar Chase, being the guy that he is, got in the end zone twice this week. But this is not something that you could rely on a consistent basis. But if you come in and give them that first-round draft capital and in return only ask for a 3rd or 4th-round pick with Jackson Smith-Njigba, they will feel like it's a win based off the recent performance with Jamar Chase. And then getting Trey McBride in exchange for Jake Ferguson might sound like an overpay. that might sound like a little bit too much, and maybe you won't even be willing to do it, and don't consider it a buy low. You have to remember the fact that CeeDee Lamb is coming back to this offense. Jake Ferguson did see his worst performances with CeeDee Lamb a part of that offense. So I do still think that CeeDee Lamb coming back is going to lessen Jake Ferguson's involvement. And I do think Jake Ferguson will continue to be good, but I don't think he'll be as good as he was without CeeDee Lamb when CeeDee Lamb comes back. This feels like a unique window. I think you can upgrade at both positions right here based off of good performances from players I don't see as much long-term upside for as I do with Trey McBride and Jackson Smith-Njigba. But I will tell you this. These are just my initial ideas of trade ideas that you could go after to get some of these buy low candidates. If you want an entire team breakdown from me with multiple trade options, multiple trade ideas to help your team improve and waiver wire acquisitions as well, you can get a full team breakdown from me when you become a premium customer at fsroundup.com. So once your 12-day free trial ends and you're an official paying customer, I will break down your entire team for you. Now, I will warn you, I am definitely behind on team breakdowns. I've gotten way more requests for team breakdowns than I thought, and I like to take my time on them. Make sure you're getting my full attention and full value of the team breakdown that you are paying for. So if you do want a team breakdown, join FS Roundup as a premium customer today, and I will get you your full team breakdown whenever your first payment processes. And in the meantime, utilize the waiver wire tool as an FS Roundup premium customer, because the last thing you want to do is end up looking like a guy like this.
This is Ted. Look at him. Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast for the third year in a row. Don't be Ted. Use Fantasy Football Roundup to automate your waiver pickups and rest easy this season. Huh. Look at him.
Now, going to our next trade candidate here, I think it's actually a pretty unique window to buy on Jahmyr Gibbs as well. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm not going to say that you're going to get this guy 100% of the time. Like, I think if you're in an advanced league and someone has Jahmyr Gibbs, nobody's going to trade you Jahmyr Gibbs in an advanced league. But I do think in certain situations, number one, if you are not in an advanced league as a lot of other people would be, and number two, if they look across the board of first-round picks and see the performances, especially over the past couple of weeks, I think there's an opportunity here because Jahmyr Gibbs, let's just go through him really quick, right? Pull up under the hood, and you can see Jahmyr Gibbs is the RB5 in full PPR formats with 19.1 fantasy points per game. So it's not, again, like you're doing anything wrong by having Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's not crushing anybody's weeks. His worst week was in week 1 when he had 15 points against the Green Bay Packers, and his second worst week was against the Cincinnati Bengals in this previous game. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs, I think the one thing that could have people a little bit suspicious about what his upside is moving forward, and it feels a lot like last year before the draft actually happened, is that David Montgomery does still have games where he is the better fantasy back than Jahmyr Gibbs. That's happened all throughout Jahmyr Gibbs' career. But what hasn't changed is the upside absolutely on a weekly basis rests with Jahmyr Gibbs. You are much better off with Jahmyr Gibbs as a fantasy back than you are with someone like David Montgomery. So yes, I do think there is a window here because if you look at the volume for him last week against the Cincinnati Bengals, he had 12 carries, didn't get in the end zone, and he also had 2 targets in this game. Now, he got in the end zone on that reception on one of them, but he has only had one 20-point performance in a full PPR format. So he has not been exactly a game changer for your fantasy team. While he has not crushed you, he has not been the game changer like someone like Christian McCaffrey has. And I'm actually going to be going through my full rest of season running back rankings later today. So make sure to stay tuned for that video. But I will give you a hint. Christian McCaffrey is not as high as Jahmyr Gibbs is in my rest of season rankings as running backs. I like the idea of sending away Christian McCaffrey and George Pickens for Jahmyr Gibbs and Emeka Egbuka. Now, I'll just give you a hint. The reason I don't want CMC as badly as I want Jahmyr Gibbs is because I worry about McCaffrey's workload that they're giving him right now and causing an injury to him. They can't help themselves with Christian McCaffrey. Kyle Shanahan, if he's on the field, he's going to utilize Christian McCaffrey until the wheels fall off. That's just Kyle Shanahan and his mentality as a head coach. And if you look at the rushing upside with McCaffrey, it has not been there this year. Not only has he not gotten in the end zone, he hasn't been running the ball that efficient this year. So yes, I'm not trying to say that McCaffrey sucks and you need to move off him by any means necessary, but I think if you can get an upgrade with someone like Jahmyr Gibbs and get a Emeka Egbuka in addition to George Pickens sending him away, when CD comes back, George Pickens won't be that same level of upside that Emeka Egbuka will be this year. I laughed at people for months at this point who called Emeka Egbuka a sell-high candidate after his strong start to the season. This is a legitimate wide receiver one in fantasy football, and I'm hoping people are understanding that at this point, which means you may not be able to pull this trade off, but again, this is my idea, and it is an initial idea. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but I think it's worth trying to do this to capitalize on a little window with buying Jahmyr Gibbs right now before Week 6 fantasy football. And the last guy that I want to talk about is also a Detroit Lion, and I think we've reached the point where in certain circumstances, trading for Jameson Williams is an opportunistic move. Now, I will preface this by saying it's similar to the Rashee Rice thing. You don't want to trade for Jameson Williams if you are 1-4 or 0-5 or even 2-3 and you need wide receivers immediately on your roster. But if you are 5-0, if you are 4-1, if you are 3-2, and you have a strong wide receiver room, and you feel like sometimes in a bye week or maybe just in a pinch you could get a big play, I think Jameson Williams is a good target to acquire. So Jameson Williams, there's been no secret. He's had one good game this year in fantasy, and the rest of it has basically been garbage. I mean, he's the wide receiver 49 in a full PPR format. He's got 21 targets through 5 games. I've been saying this for Jameson Williams for a long time now. I didn't like him in the pre-draft process too much because I saw this fluctuation in targets continuing to do this again in 2025. His most targeted game was Week 4 against the Cleveland Browns. He had 8 targets in that game, and he only came away with 2 catches. So he is not, and I don't know if he ever will be, a true wide receiver option for the Detroit Lions. I think he's more of a big play threat and still more of a gadget guy than an actual wide receiver 2 over the middle of the field who could be relied on to be more of a target guy. I think Jameson Williams is what he is, and you have to acknowledge that before you go trading for Jameson Williams. Because I'm not going to tell you to trade Stephon Diggs for Jameson Williams. That wouldn't make much sense because Diggs is more of a target guy and more of a consistent guy on a weekly basis at this point than someone like Jameson Williams is going to be. But Jameson Williams, if you want to go ahead and try to target somebody, I would send away Marvin Harrison Jr. and J.K. Dobbins for Jameson Williams and Javonte Williams. And the reason I'm going to tell you to trade away Marvin is because Marvin Harrison Jr., there's a couple differences here, but there's also a lot of similarities. So number one, Marvin is the wide receiver one in Arizona, not the number one target. That's Trey McBride, who we also want to trade for this week, but he is the wide receiver one in Arizona. Jameson Williams is not the wide receiver one. Now, the big similarity between the two is they both go through volatile times, meaning that Marvin Harrison Jr. sometimes will come out and give you 20 points, and they'll come out and give you 3 points the next week because Marvin doesn't look as good that day. So the volatility with Marvin is just as frequent as it is with Jameson Williams. It's just that Jameson Williams right now, his price is so much lower than Marvin's that it makes sense to do a move like this because J.K. Dobbins, in addition, you're getting a massive upgrade with Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams at this point is a top 5 back in fantasy. I'm not sure if you know that. That is a top 5 running back in fantasy football right now, and I view it as more sustainable throughout the season than I do with J.K. Dobbins, who I like J.K., but the reality is that they did draft R.J. Harvey to eventually take more of a not 3-down bell cow role, but more of an important role in this offense, which will minimize and shrink J.K. Dobbins' upside as a whole. So I think this is a good time to go try to buy Jameson Williams because realistically, you could probably even get him cheaper for this. So let me know who your primary target is before Week 6 fantasy football. And again, stay tuned for the rest of season running back rankings, which will be out today.